Mufia Baimu, not Ghana 14 Bisa or Monsem, say Yansasi, Mocheche, no. Why not toss answers, no? And then I may say, Mayor Commission of Inquiry.
He said they have to leave government so Ghanaians can ask them questions about the lands they sold and who bought the lands. All the lands they sold, they will answer the questions. The lands are for all of us Ghanaians. Many of the lands are for chiefs, and then they take the lands and say they are going to use them for projects, but they end up selling them to themselves and their cronies.
With the greatest of respect, what I do is that I deal with records. And the repository of records relating to lands is the Lands Commission. And the records at the Lands Commission and the records that have been furnished me, which are put out, suggest that no transaction relates to the Boy Center. That no sale or no lease or no grant or no rights have been created in respect of the Boy Center. I've seen the Honorable Ablakwa make further allegations and some 50-year lease and all of that. I've asked that they should check it out for me. And when I fumble the facts, I'll put that out. But Winston, renovation doesn't constitute a sale. I mean, if I should point that out.
You know, talking about those who have bought lands, the feeling I get from Ghanaians is that these are state lands, and so whoever has bought it, the list should be made available for all to see. And I'm sure you wouldn't mind doing that.
I wouldn't mind at all.
And right, you heard Samuel Abujinapo, who is MP Damongo and Minister Lands and Natural Resources. He joins us on the phone. Here in the studio is Samuel Okudzeto Ablakwa, MP North Tong and Chairman, Assurance Committee of Parliament and Member, Foreign Affairs Committee of Parliament. We'll also be joined by Dr. Arthur Kennedy, physician and political activist. And subsequently, Kofi Bento will join us as we discuss. Kofi Bento, Kofi Tonto will join us as we discuss the other issues that we have to canvass for you. Thank you very much. Abujinapo is actually at, there's a cabinet meeting ongoing, so he will join us. We'll do a quick one with him because he issued a statement, 11-page statement, explaining, rebutting, refuting, and clarifying the issues with specific, some of the specific lands that were mentioned by Okudzeto Ablakwa in his series of exposés. But there's been a rebuttal to that as well about a certain selective approach to it and a certain conflict as far as the minister's responses are concerned and that of the Minister for Local Governments are concerned. So we'll try to see if we can reconcile that for you. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. It is brought to you by the kindest sponsorship of Bank of Africa, strong as a group and close as a partner. MTN, everywhere you go. Ashesi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. Robert & Sons Optical Services, your comprehensive eye care service provider for 33 plus years. My Way Insurance. Dial *165# on MTN to join My Way today. Syntex Tanks. It's strong, it's tough. And Flamingo Paints. It's simply superior. So while we wait to have Abujinapo so he can return to that important session they're having, we will welcome Okudzeto Ablakwa. Thank you for making time to join us this morning.
Pleasure, Samson. Good to see you.
Please zoom your camera to his desk for me. I want my viewers to see what is there. Okay. So documents, mostly documents generated by the states, state departments, the lands ministry, and I suppose also you have the sole inquirer into the Bulgarian embassy situation of a document of how many pages also before him. Well, he will take his time and help us appreciate some of the issues he raises in the face of some of the responses that have come. Dr. Arthur Kennedy, are you with us? Please unmute your mic.
Yes, I am here, and good morning to all your viewers and to Honorable Okujeto Ablakwa.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Doc. Good to see you.
Maybe I should start with you before we will go to Abu Jinapa when he joins us shortly. What do you make of this debate about state capture in respect of state lands? The discussion about state capture is not limited to lands. Has been expressed beginning with the Ejapa deal, has been expressed in several other means, including the Labadi Beach hotels and the attempts to have them, all of that. What do you say about these? Particularly for someone who has a background and a good sense of history from the Nkrumah era and what you suffered under military regime, you had to leave the country, and you still look back and you love those days.
Yes, indeed, we have had a long history of state capture, and it has varied from regime to regime. As far as the current issues are concerned, I know that Okujeto Ablakwa will do a good job of laying out the case, but I spent a lot of the last day going over the cases made and the responses by Honorable Abu Jinapa as well as J. Mensah Kosa. And I want to commend Honorable Okujeto Ablakwa for a very good job done. It doesn't mean that everything he said is right or true, but I want to commend his spirit and his attitude. I think that this is a very good approach by a parliamentarian trying to provide executive oversight and asking important questions on behalf of the people. I think that I followed his case about the SNIT hotels and the arguments he made. I listened to the responses. I think he's on solid ground, following his lead. I went to read things about Shiraj going as far back as Anani and the caveats that they laid down, the precedents. And I think that he has, by and large, done a credible job. I am particularly upset with the Wa place where somebody built a filling station, the fact that we've taken land on which there are bungalows belonging to judges. That has been collapsed, and it goes on and on and on. And these things are actually very worrying. I think it is useful that Honorable Abu Jinapa has responded. I think that we are building a spirit of accountability gradually. I think that he did not fully answer the concerns, but at least the government is beginning to appreciate that the era in which one could do whatever they wanted to do are passing into yesteryears. But something I want to urge you and indeed all your viewers not to just think of state capture in the very narrow sense in which we are discussing it. I think that it is good that, as President Mahama has talked about, set up a commission of inquiry. But I want to suggest that when we talk of state capture, it is not just about buying lands. It is also
before you get to the extended, meaning of state capture, when you refer to former President Mahama talking about setting up an inquiry if he wins power, is this something that you endorse? And what should be our reaction to a person under whose regime it was not any different?
Well, that was actually one of the points I was coming to, that in the end, it seems as if we are defaulting to we all do it. Now, when you accuse people of doing bad things, whether it is buying land or being corrupt, they say, oh, the other party does it. So now people don't proclaim their innocence, just remind you of the guilt of the other person. I think that one of the things Honorable Kujeto Ablakwa said that I agree is that this ought to be bipartisan, and that, as he put it, we are not all saints in the ND, and they are not all devils in the MPP. So I think the inquiry should be bipartisan, and there should be accountability.
All right.
They ought to be questioned.
All right. Hold on there for me. I'll return to you, and I have not forgotten that it is important that you want to give a broader context to the subject of state capture and not limited to lands and the others that I made reference to earlier. Joining us is the Sector Minister, Lands, Natural Resources, Abu Jinapo, who has for a while now says because he acknowledges this problem, he has decided that all purchases or transactions relating to public lands to which the president is vested the power and authority to oversee must go through his office, and he must give approval. If he doesn't give approval, then any such transaction is void. Abu Jinapo, thank you very much for making time to join us.
Good morning, my good friend Samson, and good morning to your cherished listeners and viewers.
Right. We acknowledge the fact that you've had to move out of an important session to be part of this discussion. So let's make it quick. You have given responses that expose, if you like, the double standards as far as the two parties are concerned in seeking to raise and pontificate. But let's start with this from this premise. Okujeto is seeking to introduce a bill that will stop public officials from acquiring state property. You subscribe to that?
Well, first of all, as I say, thank you for having me. And I believe that when the Honorable Ablakwa presents such a bill, if he's able to do that within this meeting of Parliament, I believe that the matter will be subjected to scrutiny. But the general principle of conflict of interest and the very fine line which exists when it comes to conflict of interest relating to public officials and state property, that for me is a matter that we all have to be mindful of. I mean, there's absolutely no two ways about that. To that extent, I believe that if we define the rules clearly, that will go a long way to help.
Okay.
But on the broader issue of the management and utilization of our lands and natural resources.
Yes. Respectfully, before you get there, I want to get a clearer answer from you. In principle, will you in Parliament, as the majority, on your part at least, support a bill to prohibit, outright prohibition of public officials acquiring state property?
Well, I mean, something, I think you should be fair to me. I will not be able to speak for the majority.
Yeah, I want you to speak for yourself. Sorry.
Well, for myself, I will find it difficult to subscribe to an arrangement where a public official is acquiring public property. But as I say, I think the principle, the overarching fundamental principle is a principle of conflict of interest. And the nuances will be broader than we probably can exhaust through this conversation. Because first of all, you define who a public officer is. Second of all, you now have to have a conversation about the general contours of it. I mean, what are the circumstances under which this should be permissible or not permissible? But the general principle, in general terms, that public officials should not acquire public property. That one is something that I will not quarrel with. I will not have a difficulty with at all. Because public service is exactly what it should be, public service. You come into public life, you come into public life to serve. If you want to make money and acquire property, you go into private sector and make money and then acquire as many properties as you wish. And that nobody will have a problem with. Right. I don't have any difficulty with that kind of arrangement. But I'm saying the intricacies of it will have to be dealt with in Parliament if such a bill ever were to be presented to Parliament. Yeah.
Right. So you have given the facts that look quite incontrovertible in your 11-page statement of the 16th of July, the sale of the Parks and Gardens land in Wa and Cantonment, the sale of the E.B. Du Bois, the purported sale of the E.B. Du Bois Center, which you have indicated has not happened, the Judicial Service land, then the Prison Service land at Roman Ridge. In summary, the Parks and Gardens land in Cantonment, you have shown the lease started in 2012 and eventually was granted in 2016, not under Akufo-Addo's regime. Prison Service land at Roman Ridge, the seal or lease of the land was done in 2005 and not under Akufo-Addo's regime. Parks and Gardens land in Wa, the lease for commercial development purposes, of course, done under your government, but you justify that it's for a good purpose, and there's a filling station serving the needs of the people. The E.B. Du Bois Center, you say that it's not being sold or leased to any private entity, and you show your evidence to that effect. And finally, the Judicial Service land, you say the lease started in 2014 and effected in 2015, clearly not under the MPP regime. That's where the debate ends.
It shouldn't end there. Something, I responded to specific allegations, and my attitude when it comes to these matters is when they are raised, you assemble the facts. And when you assemble the facts, you put the facts out. And so that is just what you did. I mean, I didn't intend to embarrass anybody or embarrass any government or point fingers at any government. My point was that allegations were made that these parcels of land had been sold by the Akufo-Addo administration, and they were evidence of, those are evidence of state capture. I mean, such an allegation should worry me, because I will imagine that the measures that we put in place to protect and ensure the effective utilization and management of our public land for the benefit of the Ghanaian people, who are the true owners of these lands, should not lend itself to this kind of situation. And so I call for the records and I call for the facts. And those are the facts we put out there. I don't want to belabor the point. But there are three fundamental points I want to make in relation to this discussion. The first one is that this heightened interest scrutiny is welcomed. I welcome it. I've said this since I became Minister for Lands and Natural Resources, that the only way we can effectively manage the lands and natural resources of our country for the good of the Ghanaian people is if all of us show interest. The legislature, the judiciary, the media, like we are doing, civil society, individuals, and so on and so forth. And so what the Honorable Ablakwa is taking up, or what is being discussed, I welcome it fully. So that's the first point. The second point is that we lose the benefit of the discussion if we situate it in a narrow, self-serving political context. Something we will lose it. It will just be an exercise in futility. It will not be productive. If we begin to say that Akufo-Addo government sold this and sold that, and therefore the Akufo-Addo government is engaged in state capture.
We have been doing that for over a decade or 2 decades now. I'm not sure it's been of any benefit.
Yes, it will not help us, because that's how I sit here. Something. I have a litany of land sales in Cantonment, in Ridge, in Roman Ridge, in Airport, in Labone, the primest of places in Accra, which were sold under President Mohammed's administration. Some were sold under President Kufuor, some were sold under President Mills, some were sold under President Ronnie. So if we are going to now begin to generate... And
some were also sold under President Akufo-Addo?
Yes, exactly. I'm not going to deny that. I'm going to get to the third point, which will probably answer that question. So that if we get into that kind of finger pointing, we will lose the essence of the discussion. And if you allow me, we are at the cabinet retreat at Peduasi. This subject is a matter that has been discussed in about 3 previous cabinet meetings, and we took a great deal of time, I think, on Thursday at the cabinet meeting to exhaust a subject which is a linkage of this kind of discussion. And I'll give you a little bit insight into it. I mean, I'm getting distracted in terms of how I wanted to approach this discussion. But let me just tell you, you see, you have a situation where, for example, public institutions generally, and then if you want public universities in particular, construe lands which have been, public lands which have been granted to them as lands which belongs to those institutions, something. And they deal in them with, or they deal in them and they leverage them with third parties in a way that they pleases, in a way that pleases them. And so I don't want to mention the name of any institution, but you have institution A, who has been given, say, public lands of 50 acres to be used to attain the purposes for which the institution is established. The institution then goes, for example, into a public-private partnership arrangement with a private sector third party, and grants, say, 30 or 40 acres of the land to the private parties, private sector parties, without recourse to government, without recourse to the land commission, without recourse to the ministry, without recourse to the government. And then they have this thing they call sharing of bungalows or sharing of infrastructure that will be developed on that property. No value for money. It doesn't really go to the core mandate of the institution. It doesn't serve the objectives or the objects for which the institution was established. And then the question then arises, that those lands, do they constitute public lands or not? And show that institution seek the consent of government before they are able to go into this kind of arrangement. All of these matters have been resolved, and I'm coming to issue a statement to that effect, a public statement, and we're coming to put rules to regulate that. That is a whole area of abuse across the public sector, across the public service of our country, and it's been shown for years.
I thought you had resolved that. I thought you had resolved that by insisting that all such transactions involving public lands must get your certification, your approval. Otherwise, they will be deemed as void.
You are right in raising that point. It is resolved to a lesser extent. It is resolved where the land is still vested in the Lands Commission. That's number one. It is resolved where the land is being granted to the public institution, and the public institution is not construing the land as its property, and therefore does not fall within the four corners of public land as defined by the Constitution. And so the Attorney General had to come up with an opinion to, first of all, define what constitutes public land. So I'll give you an example. So you have the colonial avenue, which acquired large parcels of land for public institutions. Here, maybe I should mention one or two, because those are the obvious ones. Ghana Armed Forces, public universities, some public institutions, had large parcels of land. And the colonial government, the Nkrumah government in particular, then grant leases to these institutions. Okay. Then the state then has reversionary interest. The question which arose, are these public lands or not? And if they are public land, are these institutions allowed to deal in them as they please, or without recourse to government, and so on and so forth? So these are the matters that we get.
But clearly on that issue, why should there be a difficulty? Because all these departments, agencies, and so on, they are under the control of the executive. So it is your edict, it is your fatwa that they will follow.
That's what I'm saying. That is what I'm saying, that it has been resolved. And I'm telling you that the public institutions don't take the view that you're taking. They mount very, if you want, seemingly strong legal argument to come to the conclusion, in their view, that these do not constitute public. And something that is why actually even the New Lands Act, Act 1036, specifically Section 235, has prohibited the grant of public lands to public institutions through leaseholds or freeholds, and has actually gone as far as saying that you can only give certificate of use. You give them a certificate which will give them the right to use the land, but you cannot grant a lease or cannot grant a freehold. Parliament, in its wisdom, in enacting the New Lands Act, sought to cure this mischief moving forward. But I'm talking about public institutions which already have leases granted to them. So what is the point I'm making? The point I'm making is that it's a bigger conversation, it's a broader conversation. And the moment we narrow it down to partisan discourse. These people sold this and that, those people sold that land. We will lose the essence of the conversation. I welcome the conversation.
That's right.
And I said it on your platform that we are going to have a national land symposium, which is being planned for sometime in August, where we are bringing all stakeholders for us to have this conversation. But I welcome the conversation.
Right. Nonetheless, let's get to the rebuttals to your responses and explanations. We are told that the Minister for Local Government and Rural Development, Martin J. Mensah-Kosa, answering a question in Parliament posed by Okudzeto Ablakwa on July 4, 2024, gave a position different to yours on at least two of the instances in respect of the Wa Parks and Gardens land. He was of the view that he was going to take active steps to reclaim the land and demolish what he called the illegal fuel filling station constructed on that land. But your communication said that was a good use to the land. That was a proper, as it were, disposition of the land. What do you say to that?
Well, the specific response to that is, I would rather that I don't even get into this, this person said, that person said that. But anyway, let me give you a response. Something, you're a lawyer, I'm a lawyer. I deal with records of land, okay? So if you take a government bungalow, for example, the government bungalow is managed by the Ministry of Works and Housing. It's not managed by me. I manage, when I say me, I mean the Ministry of Lands and Lands Commission. We deal with the lease. If the Ministry of Works and Housing wants to say redevelop the bungalow, they will just knock on our doors and do the needful in terms of leaseholds and so on and so forth, and then it will be done. The management of the bungalow is very much within the remit of the Ministry of Works and Housing. The Ministry of Local Government deals with planning. LUSPA, Land Use and Spatial Planning Authority, sits under the Ministry of Local Government. So if land is granted to an individual and the individual uses the land in a manner which does not conform to the planning of that particular jurisdiction or that particular enclave, the Ministry of Local Government is very capable of invoking its bylaws and laws and so on and so on. So there is no contradiction whatsoever. I just deal with records of land. The question was posed. This particular land was sold. It's evidence of state capture. I said, give me the records which speaks to the sale or otherwise of the land. The records have been given and it's put it out. So far as I'm concerned, by operation of law, a sale is concluded when a lease is granted. So I deal with lease, and that is why I put it out. The land was sold in 2019. On the file, that's the justification that was given for the sale of the land.
The expectation then will be that you correct the minister, and on questions or in issues of law, legal matters, if it were a court and so on, your testimony or what you say will be preferred on land over what that minister will say. But it is not healthy that you are saying something different, he's saying something else. When it comes to the cantonment's land, he actually insisted that that land was firmly under the control of government and that he was going to take steps to remove the containers of the, is it Danaik, the company, real estate company on it. He actually moved to do so.
No, we are not saying two different things at all, Samson. I want to repeat. The Lands Commission and the Ministry of Land deals with records relating to land. The use of the land, the development of the land, whether the local, I mean, when you have a lease, even as a private person, if you buy land today, it doesn't mean that you can use the land for whatever purposes you choose. You will go to the local assembly, you go to the Ministry of Local Government for permits, for that, before you can develop the land. So if I say that the land was sold in 2015, that is a statement of fact. That's the fact. The Parks and Gardens was sold in 2015, I think 2015. That is where the lease was granted. But for purposes of sale, that is absolutely unquestionable. That's the record of land. The Minister of Local Government says they will not allow to develop land. They will not allow to continue on it. Clear the beginning. That doesn't contradict the fact that the land is very much was complete. We deal with records of that. I was answering the question of the state, and I did answer that. What the Ministry of Local Government deals with and what he's dealing with, that is within his mandate in terms of proper planning, proper use of land, and so on and so forth. It doesn't contradict what I put out at all. It is not in any measure.
But we can say safely that you acknowledge that this problem is widespread, it is very bad, and that is why we understood, as I think some time ago confirmed by Kwame Jan, who's been consultant to your ministry, that you had to employ the services of someone, this man named Jato, who was going around making sure that state lands are protected. Is that correct?
Look, Samson, I'll be the first person to admit that our land administration, we still have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of improvements to make when it comes to the administration of public lands and lands generally in our country. It's a systemic problem, and it's not a problem which is been created by this current government. It's a problem that the current government, on the contrary, is resolving. And in all humility and modesty, I feel very proud of the work that we have done at the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources, the Lands Commission. And I challenge anybody to go to Lands Commission. I'm not saying Lands Commission is sacrosanct or that you find no fault with the Lands Commission or even the ministry. But by and large, sufficiently reasonable measures have been put in place to try and protect the public lands of our country.
Right. So how well has this private entity done in helping you to protect state lands?
This private entity was contracted as far back as 2012. The private entity, when I became minister, I took the position that the private entity should not work in isolation. So I put together what we term the Public Lands Protection Unit of the ministry, headed by the Deputy Minister. And the private entity was a member of that committee, so that the work that the private entity is involved in can be properly monitored, supervised, and regulated. And that is what has happened since I've been minister. But again, a question was posed about this arrangement in Parliament. I got the records and I put it before Parliament. The person, Anyok Holding Services or so, it was they were contracted as far back as 2012, and I brought the contract. I finished the Parliament to the contract. But really, the point I'm making, but there's also another point which has been made, Samson. It's not all public lands which are utilized or which are leveraged to private capital, which is in and by itself wrong. Much of Accra, central Accra, and some of most places we see now, and the parts of Rome and so on and so forth, are public lands, and which you examine, you will come to objective conclusion that serve the country well. Several parcels of public land which are put to house, which are deployed private sector contribution, which is help the country. And so, when the discussion is it is not all public land which are sold or leased, which in and by themselves are bad. I know the judiciary, for example, have done several arrangements where judges have gotten a lot of bungalows in the use of land which have bungalows, say 4 or 5 acres, and the lands were not being utilized optimally. But so in cases where the system has been abused, we deal with it. And more importantly, is to put in place institutional reforms, institutional framework to prevent the abuse. And when the abuse happens, they are flagged immediately.
My last question will be on the Bulgarian embassy issue, but raising the issue about a private person protecting these lands, something just came up and I need you to clarify for us that this private entity protects lands belonging to the police, the military, and this private person does what he does with a network that includes his own judges. Is that what it is?
Really? I don't know about this. That would be scandalous. I don't know about that.
Okay. Now, the Bulgarian embassy, your response have come, and Okujeto has a question that he has asked about. And your response appears to admit eventually that this is what happens, that it was owned by an individual, and then this individual leases it, or as it were, outright say whatever it is, to the Bulgarian embassy. Then, upon his death, his, executors of his will or whoever they are, now come in and disturbs the Bulgarian embassy. Then subsequently, we are informed of this land having been given to somebody who belongs to your government or party.
You don't know about Kujito in the studio?
Yes, it's right here.
Oh, okay. Hello. I don't know. I'm not too sure what the issue is with the Bulgarian embassy, which is still agitating the mind of the Honorable Kujito Ablakwa. Because I think this matter has been dealt with very, very properly and dealt with squarely. First of all, something. If this controversy, or this dispute, had arisen between two private entities or two private individuals, the government of Ghana would not have stepped in any form or shape whatsoever. This land was public land. The land was sold or leased out as far back as 1974. So you replace the Bulgarian embassy with Mr. Samson Ayene. That will mean government of Ghana will not even be interested in it in the first place. The matter would have been dealt with as it was being dealt with in the courts, in the law court. This matter has been a subject matter of multiple suits in the law courts. Government of Ghana came in simply because it's a diplomatic mission, the Bulgarian embassy. That is the only reason why the government of Ghana, through the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, have had to come in. And I think you've given the facts correctly. This is a dispute between an individual and the Bulgarian embassy. The Bulgarian embassy claims ownership of the land. The individual claims ownership of the land through inheritance, as was rightly pointed out. Even before the matter will be dealt with in the law court, the person proceeds to demolish the building of the Bulgarian embassy, purported building of the Bulgarian embassy, because this is still a
Press one to a court order.
Press one to a court order, correct. But it's a diplomatic mission, so government has to step in. And so I then appointed a sole inquirer, Justice Oporiata. Justice Oporiata goes into the matter and brings up a report. Okay. I had to call the parties and ask the parties to submit to my mediation, the mediation of my good office, because they are not obliged to. The private individual could have taken the view that, Mr. Minister, you don't have jurisdiction on this matter. I want to press my case in court. There's very little I could do about it. But I used my good offices to bring them out to the negotiating table. And the question then arose as to what is the value that should be put to the damage to the Bulgarian embassy building. I said, let me put together a technical mediating committee. And we did so, representing a representative from Foreign Affairs, representative from the Ministry of Land, representative from the Lands Commission, the Bulgarian embassy, and the private entity. They sat down and they took the view that to be able to ascertain the value of the building, the statutory body responsible for that, the Land Valuation Board. So let's have the Land Valuation Unit of the Lands Commission do the valuation. The Land Valuation Unit does the valuation and comes up with 5.3 million Ghana cedis. Okay, Samson. Now, we say that the private developer should pay the Bulgarian embassy because they want to have access to the land. They demolish the building. That cannot be the liability of government. And there's never been any confusion or misunderstanding as to who should be liable or who should be responsible. The parties are still in talks with the government mediating team, to find a final resolution of this matter through the payment of this money. Then I think the Honorable Kujitu put out a statement who suggested that government is mulcted in damages or liabilities of 5.3 million Ghana. I said, no, government cannot, by any stretch of imagination, be responsible for even a penny of this particular litigation. Government cannot be, and government is not. And that is the clarification that I put out. All right. So in this matter, what will be with the greatest of respect, perturbation of anybody? I mean, government rather is gone at the great length to try and resolve a matter which involves a diplomatic mission.
The Dr. Yao Eduan Ponsa has no connections to your party or government and did not use the power of state somewhat covertly or overtly to acquire this property. That's the clarification you are making.
acquired the property in 1974?
No. I'm not talking about the one who acquired it in 1974.
Yeah, you state power to do what? I want to understand. I don't even know the people involved. I don't know them. I don't know their
acquired 11 December 2018
or their ethnic background or whatever. I don't know.
No. So what I'm actually referring to now as a confirmation of he being the present owner is from paragraph 5 of your press release dated 18th July. So
if you could please kindly read it to me.
Yes, the sole inquiry also made a finding of fact that Mr. Lentin leased the property to the Bulgarian embassy by a private contract. Following the death of Mr. Lentin, however, the executor of his will, Mr. Jojo Hagan, caused the property on the land to be demolished, pursuant to a court order, before assigning the land to one Dr. Yao Edu Amponsa. And Dr. Yao Edu Amponsa, as we understand...
Ampoma.
Okay. Dr. Yao Edu, Ampoma. And we understand Dr. Yao Edu Ampoma got this property in 2018.
Yeah, but the issue we are dealing with is the demolition. That's exactly what we are dealing with. If the Bulgarian embassy building had not been demolished, there would not have been an issue. It would have been a pure civil matter in the law court, which the law court will determine something. I mean, you're a senior lawyer, so I mean, the ownership of land is not determined by the Minister for Land if the parties disagree. It will be determined by a court of competent jurisdiction. And as I said, they were in court.
Right.
There have been multiple suits in court. Hold on, just a minute. And then we are told that somebody used government power or connections to government to demolish the building. You just read the statement which said that the demolition was done pursuant to a court order. So how does that become the responsibility of the government?
All right.
When it was
Thank
done
you.
pursuant to a court order.
Thank you very much, Samuel Abujinapolis, MP Damongo and Minister Lands and Natural Resources. He had to come out of a cabinet meeting going on to join us. So we had to take him, and then we will settle with Okudzeto Ablakwa here and Dr. Arthur Kennedy, who is also joining us from the US of A. We will be right back. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile, your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. And our first subject that we have been canvassing for you, where we had the Lands and Natural Resources Minister Samuel Abujinapo for over some 30 minutes of discussion, has to do with state capture. For now, defined, limited to the taking over of lands by people in government. I have a number of questions for Samuel Okudzeto Ablakwa. And as you know, he has been at this for a very long time, at least officially from 2010 thereabouts until when there was a judgment.
2007.
That's what I meant to say. Until 2012, when there was a judgment that went in favor of Jacob Echebe Lamte over the state bungalow that he was buying for himself, that Samuel Okudzeto Ablakwa and Omane Boama disagreed with. They went to the Supreme Court. The majority of the court took a decision that for as long as the papers were concerned, Jacob Echebe Lamte didn't breach any law and ought to have it. So the question confirms some of the points that Abujinapo raises. If the papers look good and they look right, everything will be noise. But what Ghanaians, I suppose, will be more interested in and happy about is this bill that you are seeking to sponsor. So let's talk about that briefly before we get into the specific issues about those that have been responded to. Why prohibit public officers from acquiring public property rather than prohibit sale of public property completely?
Well, thank you very much, Samson. Let me take a minute to say good morning to all our viewers and listeners, and to particularly thank Dr. Atta Kennedy for his kind words. I told him many years ago that it is because of the record of people like him that I, from a very young age, went into student activism, right from my days in Presec, when I became trustee of the Greater Accra Students Representative Council, rising all the way to become NUC's president when I entered the University of Ghana. It's because of people like him, you know, the likes of Kakraba Cromwell, the likes of the Honorable Haruna Idrisu and others who were ahead of us, you know. So I do admire him greatly, and I'm honored for his kind remarks. Let me also state right from the outset that what the people of Ghana achieved this week, I will be probably ungrateful if I do not extend deepest gratitude and appreciation and just indicate how inspired I am by the Ghanaian people, particularly organized labor. 2 months ago, when I raised the issue of the sale of 60% of our shares in our Senate hotels and went to Shraj on the 17th of May this year, that this, reading all the facts, putting together the evidence, I was clear in my mind that this was a conflict of interest case. It was an insider dealing. And indeed, when you now read the May 24th, 2024 Transaction Advisors Report, all of those fears, the documentations are intercepted, confirm that what had been offered to Rock City was not made available to other bidders. They were being allowed to even pay on a 24-month installment without interest. They didn't have a bank guarantee. There were no evidence of ability to pay. Their financials did not show that they could close the deal. I am glad that organized labor, the Ghanaian people, backed us, not only with the June 18 demonstration, which was massive, but with what I call the final push, which made everybody run away from the transaction. By Friday last week, the buyer was running away when he saw the fire on the mountain that, hey, with how Ghanaians have mobilized, I'm no longer interested, keep your hotels. And then SNIT had to issue 2 statements, one close to midnight on Friday.
Unsigned.
Unsigned.
The other one signed.
And the next day, the board chair had to sign. Few days ago, she had been writing, defending the transaction, calling the bluff of everybody, organized labor, myself, you know, the good people of this country.
Her point was that there was nothing legally wrong.
Yeah, and that even angels will. Meanwhile, she had received this transaction advisors report, which was so damning on the 24th of May, and yet ignored it. And you see, what I ask is, if you would not value the transaction advisor's advice to you, why do you contract him and agree to pay $491,000? Over 7 million Ghana cedis. That is no cheap money. So if you were determined that you will do whatever you want, no matter what anybody says, you will proceed with impunity, with intransigence, with belligerence, why spend over 7 million cedis of our money? An organization claiming that you are cash strapped. That is why you are even going into this transaction in the first place, because you don't have money. You need a strategic investor to bring you money. So the major lesson from the victory of this week, the nationwide strike on Monday, is that there are some issues that we should subdue, relegate. Sectarian interests, partisan interests, you know, and all those other ethnic, whatever interests. It was admirable to see doctors, nurses, professors, lecturers at UTAC, mortuary workers, Aboboya, bicycle riders, everybody. We were united behind the national interest. It should tell you what we can achieve. There are so many things, even this state capture. If we all come together and say that, look, enough is enough, These politicians are taking us for a ride. Everything is on sale. The country is on sale. There will be nothing left in no time.
When
so let
parts
us rise.
of the Achimota Forest, a very important ecological zone, were being declassified and to give for whatever.
You know,
you wait for the media to talk, and you leave just those of us sitting here to talk.
Yes.
Organized labor, you have power. You can do
power.
a lot more.
Now you see your power.
This thing, the bid, when did it start?
2018.
2018.
Yes.
When did Rock City start?
Rock City started operating in 2019 on their own website. Yeah.
And by then, they had the muscle and the experience to take over important institutions with a lot of history behind them.
Very interesting, you know. Very interesting.
So let's go to your private members.
All celebration to the Ghanaian people. Let's continue to put Ghana first. Let's come together. When we unite, we are unstoppable. No matter the propaganda or the attacks, the mudslinging, they cannot stop us. Once we unite, we will succeed. So 21 gun salute to organized labor and the Ghanaian people. And you in the media, you also gave us a platform to discuss this. So I am happy that we are starting with the private members bill. And I can disclose on your show this morning that all is set, at least with our first draft. And I have a copy here. We are calling it the Public Assets Protection Bill 2024. Ultimately, what we want to do is to prohibit all politicians and politically exposed persons and other top-ranking public servants from purchasing state assets. Your question about...
Why don't you just prohibit the sale to them?
Yes. So we discussed it. You know, Professor Kweku Azar is our lead consultant on this. We discussed it, but we noticed that since 24 February 1966, there's been this insatiable appetite to just sell state assets, to divest, to privatize. And that would be a Herculean task. So, and having analyzed how the sale goes, those who benefit at the end of the day, we take the view that if we prevent the politicians and politically exposed persons from purchasing these state assets, we will virtually achieve the same end. Because look, if you do the analysis, you pierce the veil. Even those who set up companies, those who, you will see that they are either a relative, a close friend, an associate of those who are buying. So once we separate the culprits, those who have the appetite to own these state assets, and you take them out, you will see that drastically, in our analysis, we believe that we will solve over 80% of the problem.
That's why in the first draft bill, you are defining these officers to include
very broadly
elected officials, members of parliament, assembly members, and other elected representatives, senior government officials, ministers, deputy ministers, and heads of government and departments or agencies, judicial members, judges and other judicial officers, high-rank military officials, senior officers in the armed forces, state-owned enterprise executives, CEOs, and board members of state-owned enterprises, regulatory and supervisory authorities, officials and regulatory bodies that oversee public procurement and asset management, immediate family members, spouses, children, parents, and siblings of these officers. And finally, entities with controlling interests, companies or organizations where these public officers hold significant ownership or control. That is so broad.
Yes, because if you go through the list of people who have benefited from these state assets, and I have a tall list here, you see these people there. And you see what the politicians do is that they try to spread it so that they can give some 10% to some judges here, some military officials here, so that virtually everybody is on board. You know,
when an issue comes up, then they can say,
it's not just us. It's not just us.
When you need sirens, you include the judges, so you can say judges too are getting it.
Well, you see the trick, you know. So you go through the compilation I have here, Fourth Republic, state assets in the hands of people, and you see these officials there, you know, and that is why we have couched it this way, so that once everybody is really removed. Because you see, ordinary
So if they
Ghanaians,
cleverly set up a company,
those in the private sector.
if they cleverly set up
Yeah.
a company or they have a connection with a company, that company cannot even
No, they cannot.
purchase.
They cannot, yes.
Okay.
Yes, we'll pierce the veil and they cannot. What I also like about this private members bill is that we are going to create, for the first time in the history of this country, what we are calling the registry of assets. Something, will you believe that? As we speak, if you ask the managers of this country to tell you how many bungalows we have in the name of Ghana, they will struggle. They will tell you that, oh, poor record keeping, the data is not comprehensive. And yet, when it is time to sell, they know where they are to sell them. We have been asking the Honorable Abu Jinapo, I have filed an urgent question, the Honorable Kwame Govins Agboja, for more than 2 years now, that we want him to give us a comprehensive list, how much state land we have left. And then all those who have purchased state lands from 1992 to now. He has not been able to. He says that, oh, you know, it's a lot of data, they are still compiling and all. That's why this week I was happy when on the Super Morning Show, he said that he's willing to now make the list available. We have been pursuing this for years in Parliament. So you see, when some people try to create the impression that I am on a partisan vendetta, or I have identified some people I dislike and I'm going after them, that's not what this is about. Particularly for we, the young politicians. We are saying that, look, we are observing what is going on in Kenya, what has happened in Mali, in Guinea, in Burkina Faso. We are scared. Have you read the Afrobarometer?
Yeah.
45% of Ghanaians don't mind, you know, soldiers taking over to clean up the system. What does that say about us in the system? Look at how the Ghanaian people are rating political parties, rating the presidency. It is only the military that scores 67%. We must be worried. So for those of us who, at least, you know, believe that we'll be in this space for some time, we have age on our side, and it's about posterity judging us. When we came, did we try to solve the problem, or we just joined the bandwagon? We became part of the problem, immersed ourselves, and caused more problems. So we are saying, let us have a registry of assets. And if you look at how we've couched it, Section 8, Registry of Assets. A registry of all state assets shall be created and published on a government website, regularly updated in the spirit of transparency and public accountability. The State Interest and Governance Authority, SIGA, is mandated to coordinate with all state institutions to compile and publish all state assets. So if you are in WA and you know that this land is for parks and gardens, it belongs to all of us, you will protect it. Right. You will not allow somebody to show up and say that under some clandestine move, I have title, I'm building a fuel filling station. The people can then rise up. I bet you there are many people who are walking past that place who didn't even know that it's for them. They own the land. It's a state asset. It's for parks and gardens. And so should not be used for a fuel filling station. So
that's ahead of the elections, you were supposed to own how many?
Yeah, these days they claim there are mansions all over the world.
Right.
I mean, but that's all these lies will continue. So, so it's a very exciting piece of legislation, forward-looking. We are also saying that even when you leave office, 5 years you are barred from participating in any of these transactions.
5 years after you leave
5 years after you leave office.
Why not 10?
Well, we'll have in the coming days stakeholder consultation. We'll invite you. But some are even saying that, you know, prevent them even after they've retired from politics. They shouldn't go back.
You have a parliament whose life is just about 4 months. Will this work?
Well, I'm really pushing. I'm lobbying colleagues. I've secured a few colleagues on the other side who are willing, because I want it to be bipartisan. As I always say, even when we won this Senate Hotels matter, I emphasize that it's not a personal victory. It's a victory for the Ghanaian people.
All right.
I want this bill to be owned by a good number of MPs, by all of us. Imagine if organized labor, everybody says that. Look,
those of you who are sharing your messages with us, give us an indication if you are in support of the bill
so we can do a
that
quick
is
poll.
being sponsored by Samuel Okudzeto Ablakwa. And that bill is with an interesting name, Public Asset Protection Bill 2024. and I'm looking at the memorandum before me right now.
Yeah.
Now,
And have you seen the penalties? Section 5. Any politically exposed person found to have violated this act shall be subject to disciplinary action, including termination of employment, fines, and imprisonment for a term not exceeding 5 years. Any state asset acquired in contravention of this act shall be forfeited back to the state.
The one who oversaw the transaction also ought to suffer.
Okay.
Because you are not supposed to do it, so you don't do it.
Okay.
Right.
That's interesting.
Once the person is politically exposed, you don't sell to them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now we'll add that.
Now let's get to the issues that are coming up from some of the specifics that you raised.
Yes.
And if we can be very brief about them. The Bulgarian embassy.
Yes.
You said government was going to be saddled with the
5.3 million.
Yes. The statement from the Lands and Natural Resources Minister shows that government had nothing to do with this. It was a private person's land. Bulgarian embassy bought it, and then that person dies. And then that person's will, someone who seeks to inherit him, comes to cause trouble. And they say that there was a court order that he used to do the demolition. Eventually, the land gets into the hand of one Dr. Yao Edu Ampoma. You suggest this is politically exposed person. Abu Jinapo suggests to you that that cannot be the case. What's going on?
So, unfortunately for the lands minister, what he has been stopping me and doing everything that I don't get, the full Sole Inquiries report. My lawyers filed an RTI request to his ministry. The respected senior lawyer, Mr. Tadio, sorry, no response. They treated it with contempt.
When was this?
Over a year. It's been more than a year.
Okay.
I filed urgent questions in Parliament. They said they won't publish the report. I mean, why set up a sole inquirer?
But that sole inquiry was set up after you blew the whistle
After I
on
blew
this
the
matter.
whistle, yes.
Okay.
I in one of my exposés, revealed that, look, when Ghanaians thought that after the Nigerian High Commission demolition, that would be the last. And you see, we are playing with fire. You know that under the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, this is an act of war. Indeed, our president, when the Nigerian demolition happened, our president had to call his counterpart and beg. The foreign minister at the time, Onyama, issued a strongly worded statement that they consider it a criminal attack, an attack on Nigerian sovereignty, and that they were going to retaliate. Our president had to intervene. Then they did it again. So we shouldn't joke with these matters. They have grave consequences. Unfortunately for the lands minister, through my usual interception capacity, I have intercepted the full Sole Inquiries report. I have a copy here, 149 pages. And a lot of what the minister is saying is not supported by the facts.
What do you mean?
First of all, the land, the Sole Inquirer has determined that it's a state land. If you read 6.1, it says the subject matter of this inquiry forms part of state lands acquired under Certificate of Title, TLS, number 3443, dated 6 July 1920, for public services. In 1977, the government of Ghana granted a lease of 3.235 acres for a term of 99 years on 1st April 1974 to Mr. Theophilus Kofi Layton. The lessee erected a dwelling house thereon and rented it out to the government of the People's Republic of Bulgaria. So let's establish that. It's a state land. That is what the Sole Inquirer determined. Then, the lands minister this morning is also creating the impression that, oh, it's entirely private. They have come in just because it's a diplomatic mission. And, there's no complicity on the part of state actors. That is not what you find when you read this report. If you come to page 122 of this report, 6.8, Bulgaria's land title certificate number GA6454 was eventually cancelled. We find that this was fraudulently done by the use of the judgment against Mr. Ansah. So that the Sole Inquirer has discovered that when these demolishers claimed that they had a court judgment, it was a fraudulent court judgment. They didn't actually have a court judgment. They went to attach another person's judgment called Mr. Ansah. Can you believe that? And they had their agents in the Lands Commission who came along with them. So this sole inquirer recommends sanctions. What is the lands minister doing about his officials at the Lands Commission who have brought us this international disgrace? Let me continue. In procuring the cancellation of the interests of the Bulgarian embassy, however, the records from the Public and Vested Lands Management Division of the Lands Commission still indicate that the interest of the embassy is subsisting and due to expire in 2033. So the Bulgarians have an interest. Their 50-year interest expires in 2033. Then they use a different judgment, engage in fraud. It continues. It was found out that Mr. Layton had acted fraudulently by getting the Lands Registration Division of the Lands Commission to cancel the Bulgarians' interests by attaching the judgment dated 24 September 2002 against Mr. Ansah to particulars of the Bulgarian embassy for cancellation. You see why it is important that when there are commissions of inquiry, the report should be made public. If you have nothing to hide, if you don't want to shield your officials, your appointees, your agents and assigns, publish it so we all know. Then it continues. Mr. Jojo Hagan, without the necessary notices to the occupiers, forcibly evicted them and also caused the demolition of the property without following due process. This is the retired judge. He's the senior justice, Anto Ofuriata.
So what is Abu Jadapo reading and sharing with us?
So what is he reading? What is he reading? I'll make a copy for you. Very damning report. Then he continues. After the demolition, Mr. Jojo Hagan went ahead and assigned the land for the unexpired residue of Layton's lease to Dr. Yao Eduampoma on 11 December 2018. Dr. Yao Eduampoma is the person who stands to benefit in all of this fraud, all of this demolition, all of these illegal shenanigans. He is President Akufo-Addo's appointee at the NDPC. He is the government star witness against Dr. Opuni in the Opuni trial, ongoing Opuni trial. He stands to benefit. So you see, political actors, if we remove them, you see that more than 80% of these sales, these demolitions will stop. Then he continues. Dr. Yao Eduampoma went into possession and prepared the land for development. It was in the course of the development that his workers were asked to stop work and subsequently arrested by the Property Fraud Unit. We also found that the inviolability of the Bulgarian embassy has been confirmed by the Court of Appeal. Due process were not followed by the Lands Commission in the cancellation of the certificate of the Bulgarian embassy. In such cases, the cancellation should have come from the court. The fragmented recording system of the Lands Commission was partly to be blamed for the confusion leading to the cancellation of the certificate and demolition of the property. Damning report. The Lands Commission cannot extricate itself from this.
Do you know if this commission report has been appealed against? Because 6 months after the issue of a white paper on it, it becomes a judgment of the High Court in the terms of Article 280 of the Constitution. And the adverse findings can only be appealed to the High Court. And we have a Commission of Inquiry instrument by which the Attorney General can use to exact the compliance with what is in there. Do you know if there's been an appeal of the decision?
No. I don't, to be honest, I don't believe that there has been an appeal because a year after this report, I have intercepted documents that shows that they are working with the findings of this report. Indeed, if you look at the latest letter I intercepted...
There was a publication of the summary of the findings.
Yes. And the minister refused to publish. I put out a statement. I filed urgent questions that they should publish the full report. They refused. I did an RTI request. They refused. These are the things they are hiding. Now, 22nd December 2023, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs writes to the Bulgarian embassy that they are acting on this report. They have done valuation, and that the valuation, that's what I published this week, which the minister is responding to. The valuation is 5.3 million. Now, the sole inquirer is saying that we can't continue this way, where we keep losing taxpayers' money. People act this recklessly. We don't hold them to account. So find Jojo Hagan, the key actor who was working with Dr. Yeduan Poma, and get him to pay. Will you believe that a few months ago when I filed an urgent question asking the Attorney General the whereabouts of Jojo Hagan, they said they can't find him up to now. So the Bulgarians, in my engagements with them, they are saying that, look, our patience is running dry. If you can't find Jojo Hagan, we haven't seen even any declaration that he's wanted, you are not collaborating with Interpol and all of that, then the government will have to pay. That is why in my write-up I said that, look, there's a vital information being concealed, which is the fact that apart from potential conflict and straining of diplomatic relations, bilateral relations with other countries, this state capture can also lead to financial loss. Okay. Now the Bulgarians are saying that if you don't find Jojo Hagan, you would have to pay. And they have seen this report. They are aware of all the complicity with your Lands Commission. You are not doing anything to sanction the Lands Commission officials who conspired to do this work. So on Bulgaria, I am not surprised that in the minister's first statement, he conveniently forgot about the Bulgarian demolition. This matter that I personally brought it to his attention. It was due to my prompting that he set up the sole inquirer.
Okay. As we indicated,
look into this.
As we indicated at the start, let's look at what we can make out of these issues and towards your bill to make a law to prohibit, if that works, so that we don't continue to dwell in the individual matters.
Sure. That is why I am saying that, look, we need this public asset protection bill. That's what is going to stop all of this.
Let me go back to Dr. Arthur Kennedy. Dr. Arthur Kennedy, thank you very much for your patience. Having listened to the two gentlemen, what do you have to say?
Yeah, I think that Honorable Abu Janapo made an eloquent presentation in the wrong direction. I think the problem is not public institutions like universities and others entering into public-private partnerships. That happens. I think what is rising the ire of the public, which Honorable Kujato Ablakwa appropriately points out, is private individuals acquiring these assets under dubious circumstances. So I think that that is what we need to deal with. I commend for the bill, and I suggest that, as you indicated, I think that can be expanded. A big part of the problem is not just the buyers, it is also the sellers.
Right.
The people in government who are making these sales, their motives, their guidances, and whether these sales are being made in the public interest or not. And I believe that there ought to be very strong protections of public assets to prevent people from selling them, because I can tell you, if we do have time to discuss judgment debts, it is precisely the same thing that people come and say they have judgment debts.
Some of them are cooked.
The government doesn't even go to court. It settles this on the side. People get kickbacks. It is the same as these assets that we are talking about.
And in fact, the Supreme Court detected it when it said that it was as if a brigade had been set up to create loot and share. That's judgment debt. Typically what happens with some of the judgment debts, the people who get the judgment debt, actually it's a brigade in connivance with the people we entrust with the public purse to create, and then they loot and then they share.
Absolutely. And actually, if you recall, during Dr. Frimpong Boateng's interview, the case that came to his attention was for $88 million US. If you think about it, this was only one deal in the 8-year span of the government. It means that theoretically, if they were doing only one or maybe two of such deals a year, we had him for $1 billion. And I am telling you that you can mark it. When this government is done, judgment debt and how it has been settled in the shadows will be the biggest financial scandal. These things that Honorable Okudzeto Ablakwa is working on, which is very commendable, will look like small, what do they call it, plantains compared to the big things that they are doing in Judgment Day.
So that, for example, Dr. Kennedy, in the matter of the Parks and Gardens land at Cantonment, which was leased in 2012, eventually effectuated, the whole thing completed on the 29th of November 2016. The purpose, according to the Parks and Gardens, through the local government minister, under the hand of the deputy minister, Elvis Efrie Ankra, the purpose for seeking to sell 2 acres of that prime land was to, quote, raise funds to resource the Department of Parks and Gardens because the department was in, quote, dire need of office infrastructure and other working tools, and the agency wishes to sell those 2 acres of land it is currently occupying at Cantonment to enable it to raise the needed funding to resource itself. We can tell today that that has not happened. Mr. Okudzeto Ablakwa, correct? The Parks and Gardens, is it any different from what it was before this sale?
No, it hasn't happened. But I'm contesting the Lands Minister's statements on this because on the 4th of July, when I filed this question, and the Parks and Gardens is managed by the local government ministry. It's one of the agencies under the ministry. The Minister for Local Government was emphatic. Let me read from column 19 of the Hansard, the parliamentary Hansard of Thursday, 4th July 2024. This is the local government speaking, the local government minister speaking. In the particular case of the Department of Parks and Gardens land in Cantonments, the recent claimant of the portion of the land indicated that he acquired a title to the land in contention, but could not produce same after he took the matter to court. The court subsequently dismissed the case and requested the plaintiff to re-enter the case with the proper documentation. Mr. Speaker, our checks, however, reveal that the claimant did not have any valid documentation to the land. I wish to state that the land in question has a valid certificate of allocation dated 2nd October 1952 to the Department of Parks and Gardens. This is the local government.
But Abu Jinapor didn't make this up.
And then you see...
He didn't make this up attributed to 16th of August 2012 when the local government minister, deputy, wrote and said these words. The ministry has received a number of interests in the land over the years, and that proceeds from the sale shall be used to provide Parks and Gardens with a new office, staff bars, some tractors, water tankers, and the needed hand tools it is currently in dire need of to restructure and reposition itself as a viable government agency. It is not what the sale was for.
So you see, that is why I am happy that the former President Mahama has announced that there's going to be a national inquiry into all of this. I am not going to defend anybody. As I keep saying, look, in all the parties, you have people who will do wrongdoing. If the Lands Minister Abu Jinapor is right, let us delve into it. And those who did that without authorization should be sanctioned. But I was going to read July 19, 2021.
Was Dr. Kennedy speaking?
Very quickly,
So
just very quickly, that if what Honorable Abu Jinapor is saying is true, that this land had been sold since, finalized in 2015, started 2012, finalized in 2015.
In November of 2016.
2016. How come that some 5 years down the lane, July 19th, 2021, this government decided to go establish a 5-story office complex on that same piece of land for the Ministry of Local Government, Rural Development, and Decentralization? How come? It had to take the Land Use and Spatial Planning Authority.
He says, you have an answer in his statement, because he says that when they came in, they sought to cancel about that and 7 others.
That one, the cancellation had to do with the judicial land.
Judicial service land. Okay.
The judicial service land, yes. For this one, he says, you sold it, so go and deal with your mess. However, in July 2021, they sought to convert, can you believe that? The only horticultural zone we have in the capital, convert it into a new building for the ministry, 5-story building. The Land Use and Spatial Planning Authority, in a strongly worded letter to them, signed by Kwejo Yeboah, acting head, LUSPA, said that, look, based on the aforementioned observations, we would like to advise the Ladade Kotopong Assembly as follows, that the current site for the ministry's project is designated as horticultural nursery, and as part of their mandate, the Department of Parks and Gardens uses the land to nurse seedlings and to cultivate other tree species for government and other relevant institutions and the general public for planting and beautification of the city. The site is therefore an active green open space, and for that matter, a public space, and it should remain as such.
All right, thank you.
So this is what, together with environmentalists, standing up, that is how come they couldn't achieve the objective in 2021 of building a 5-story building for the Ministry of Local Government. So a lot is not adding up if you add what the local government minister told us in Parliament. That's why we need an inquiry to delve into these matters. But what is important is that hands off. We are not going to allow
there are no
sale.
Contradictions with his answers and that of...
So you have the local government minister at his ministry
that
saying
is a very
that
curious
I still
situation.
own the parks and gardens. It is under my control.
That's a
and
very curious
you know that the
situation.
local government minister has gone to remove the containers there.
All right.
And I have publicly commended the minister for his act. So, and Abu Jinapor should be careful because some of these statements will rather strengthen the hand of these, unscrupulous private sector people.
You're right about that. Let me go to Atta Kennedy.
Who want to annex.
You're right about that because as a lawyer, I've been thinking that if these matters are matters that are gaining the attention of the judicial authorities and the government, one hand, a minister of natural resources is saying this, and then the local government is saying this, you'll be daft not to take what they are doing to go and support what you are doing in the courtroom. So, Dr. Atta Kennedy, you were making a point there, and we have not forgotten that you wanted to, situate properly what state capture means and how it is manifested and the implications for this country.
Yes, these things, as I have said earlier, the minister was eloquent, but he focused on institutions, like universities and prison services and all that. There are problems that must be regulated. The problem, though, that is really getting the public's eye is private people who are using connections to acquire these properties. And we know from our history that even revolutionary governments are not immune to cronyism. The Donkome privatization of state-owned enterprise and the PNDC. We saw that, and Honorable Kujeto Ablakwa has brought quite a few of these, and the Snit hotels that almost happened a few weeks ago. The public did very well, and I commend them and the TUC for what they did. We have 2 significant weapons, our voices and our votes, to cure these things. I support fully President Mohammed's Commission of Inquiry, but I want to suggest that when we talk about state capture, we should not see it in the narrow sense of just selling these physical assets. That is part of it, but I suggest that we will find out that we've lost even more money through government judgment debts that went on. We've lost a lot of public money through the fraudulent award of contracts, even though we set up a public procurement authority. And I want to tell the people of Ghana that, for example, if you study South America, Brazil, for example, the corruption in Petrobras was actually spearheaded, its check was spearheaded by the judiciary, which ended up putting significant ministers into prison and others. So we are the men we have been waiting for. And I worry that this culture of impunity that is going on, like Honorable Kujeto Ablakwa rightly points out, can one day lead us to where we don't want to go. Mr. Rawlings may be dead, but his spirit is still among us. And as the anger on the streets mount, we have to be very, very careful. Like I said the last time I was here, when you see somebody's beard on fire, you should fetch water and put it beside your beard, because your beard could also catch on fire. So I say that judgment debt, the selling of these public buildings, lands, the award of contracts. You know, I noticed that Ablakwa was talking about some of these contracts and when people got them and all that. The same thing happened, for example, during COVID, when a company was awarded the COVID test contract at the airport, even before they were registered as a company in Ghana.
Yeah.
That is part of state capture. The whole Ejapadia document is a blueprint for state capture. I am telling you that the problem we have in our country is that there are a lot of people in our public space, in government. This government is the word, but it's happened in governments before, whose sole purpose, regardless of the policy initiative, is to figure out how to milk the public space and transfer public resources into private hands for it to become private wealth. That is why we have so much incompetence. It is profitable incompetence, because the more incompetent state services are, the more they force people and they manage to get rent seeking. That is what we are witnessing on a grand scale.
All right. The Ejapadia document you refer to is not authenticated. Many people reading it around, but we know that there have been attempts at denying the authenticity of it. There have been all sorts of suspicions and rumors. Even the bank collapse, bank cleanup exercise, you know, the rumor and the claims that CBG was an attempt to another state capture so that eventually certain people will take it and own it and command, you know, the heights of the banking industry or financial industry, so to speak. Anyway, but Ato Kennedy, before we, in just a minute, and we're moving on to something else, what do you appreciate is in the psyche of the leaders after those who acquire these lands? Those who are selling these lands, they didn't acquire them. Those who acquired them didn't sell them.
Because we have entered a new era of politics. Whatever you say about Nkrumah, he cared about this country. You know, when he was overthrown, they did a commission of inquiry. He didn't own any house, not even a house. Peduase Lodge that was built for him, he gave it to the state. He didn't have a bank account. We have a new breed of politicians who think private wealth is the be-all and end-all of being in politics. They want to just acquire wealth. Professor Buzia once said that he thought that a party must strictly separate those who believe in public service from those who are entrepreneurs. And that's why there should be a relationship, there should be a firewall between them. We have broken that firewall. So basically, most politicians also double as business people. A lot of people know that some of the biggest people who have gotten contracts under the current government have actually been MPP functionaries, some of who hold office, just as we almost saw happen in the Smith case.
Yeah.
I think that is true.
All right. So these things are very difficult to talk about because, look, we are no kids. You can just see people who had no business to their names, and suddenly within the last 7-8 years, their businesses are the go-to for everything the government has to do. Yeah. This is crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. You remember that the Architects Association had to issue a statement a few months ago that now they can't get business. Since David Ajayi arrived, friend of the president, he gets all the contracts. This W.B. Du Bois matter, he's the architect, Agenda 111, National Cathedral, Trade Fair, Marine Drive, all of them. It's as if we have only one. I need to make concluding remarks very quickly. I have been asking that the current generation of political leaders, when are we also going to acquire land banks for future development? We are only interested in selling. Selling like Ghana is coming to an end. Like the population will not increase, will not need new doctors, new nurses, new public servants to be close to new hospitals that will be constructed. Nkrumah, no matter what you say about him, our Nkrumah, not your Nkrumah, our Nkrumah, purchased lots of land, banked them, secured them for future expansion, future growth, future transformation. Samson, you love our laws. Have you read the Land Use and Spatial Planning Act 2016, Act 925? A beautiful piece of legislation. If you pay regard to the functions under Section 4S, it says that one of the functions of this organization is to create a regime that enables district assemblies to acquire land in order to prevent a reverse depressed settlement. They are not doing it.
Okay.
It's all about sale. Let me conclude by reading what the eminent jurist, Justice Adenyira, said in her obiter when I went to the Supreme Court on the Obechebi-Lamte matter. Quote, I wish to state by way of obiter that the Accra redevelopment scheme of residential properties policy, as implemented by both the Rawlings and Kufuor administrations, has not been wholly satisfactory and has raised a lot of negative comments and issues of morality from the populace. The implementation of this scheme has dislodged a lot of government and public officials from their homes to give way to luxury apartments, which only a few Ghanaians can afford.
It's like he saw today.
Yes.
This is happening right now.
Yes, happening right now. Then she adds, I will stress that since these public lands were initially used to provide housing for government and other public officials, space should be made available to decently house these officials, most of whom hold sensitive positions and thus need adequate privacy and security, unquote. Do you know that only this week, I have this letter here from the Ministry of Works and Housing, addressed to all tenants, Roman Ridge Flats, and it says, notice of a meeting. Quote, we present to you warm compliments of the Ministry of Works and Housing. The Chief Director specifically invites all tenants occupying the Roman Ridge Flats for an emergency meeting. The meeting is scheduled as follows, Tuesday, 15 July 2024, just this Tuesday, this week. Venue, Ministry of Works and Housing Conference Room, time 2 p.m. is signed by Reverend Stephen Yawose, Chief Director for Minister. I was a fly in the meeting. Do you know what they have been told? All of them move out. Accra redevelopment policy has caught up with you. Private developers are coming to redevelop your bungalows. Can you believe that? When would this stop?
Anyway, okay, so we draw the curtains on this subject here because if we have to continue, we'll discuss it and end. But there is an addendum from the minister that I just have to read to you. It says, in respect of the Bulgarian embassy, all the matters referred to by the Honorable MP are contained in the 16th May 2022 press release, which is why it was not repeated in the current release, which sought only to deal with the compensation matters. Secondly, it is not true that the ministry did not respond to his RTI request. The ministry responded on the 8th of August 2022 and said, because matters are still pending in court, and the report contains evidence of witnesses who may be witnesses in the court, this lame thing, people should stop it.
Please.
The fact that the matter is pending in court.
We want the report. You did not issue the report.
It's not the reason you should not release documents that people are seeking by RTI.
Yeah.
And this matter came up strongly yesterday. Yesterday, the RTI Commission and stakeholders met with the Subsidiary Legislation Committee to go through the RTI regulations one by one. Okay, so I conclude. He says, and the report contains evidence of witnesses who may be witnesses in the courts, in the case.
Oh, please.
It was exempt under Section 7 of the RTI Act. Please. That is the reason why the full report was not published.
Well, now we have
full report of a commission.
I mean, please.
Exempt.
Please, what are you having?
But the executive summary, which captures virtually everything.
The executive summary did not capture
on the parks and gardens matter. The land is more than 2 acres. Only 2 acres of the land was sold in 2016. Of course, that is so. So it is not the case that the entire land was sold. I'm not sure anybody has said the entire land was sold. We'll be right back.